The warning alarm screamed through the bridge of the stellar dawn like the dying cries of 1,000 worlds. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrests of her command chair as the ship's sensors painted a picture that made her blood run cold. The readings were impossible, yet there they were, blazing across her screens in angry red displays that refused to be ignored. "Captain," whispered Dr. Varys. Kethvar, the ship's Altarian science officer. His forearms trembled as they worked the controls, and his usually vibrant blue skin had faded to a sickly pale. "The readings, they can't be right. Tell me they can't be right." Elena leaned forward, her dark eyes scanning the data that scrolled across the main view screen. Energy signatures that defied known physics. Gravitational distortions that shouldn't exist. And, at the center of it all, something massive moving through the void of the Zerian system, like death itself had taken physical form. "Status report," she ordered, her voice steady despite the ice forming in her stomach. Lieutenant Commander Torres, her human first officer, spoke from the navigation station. His usually calm demeanor cracked as he read the displays. "We've dropped out of hyperspace in the Zerian system, Captain. But this place, it's supposed to be empty. The star charts show nothing here but dead worlds and asteroid fields." "Then why?" Elena asked quietly. "Are we detecting something the size of a small moon moving toward us?" The bridge fell silent, except for the persistent wail of the alarms. Elena's crew consisted of representatives from 7 different species, all members of the Galactic Council. Humans made up only about 30% of galactic spacefaring civilization, but they had a reputation for exploring where others feared to go. That reputation was about to be tested in ways Elena couldn't imagine. Chief Engineer Vortok, a massive Krielian whose rocky exterior usually radiated confidence, spoke from the engineering station. His voice, normally a deep rumble, came out as barely a whisper. "Captain, I've seen these energy readings before. In the archives. In the forbidden sections that require council clearance just to access." Helena turned to face him. "What are you talking about, Chief?" Vortok's 6 eyes closed simultaneously, a gesture of deep distress among his people. 3,000 years ago, my ancestors encountered something in the void regions. Something that consumed our greatest fleet. The survivors brought back readings just like these before the council sealed the records. Dr. Kethvar's instruments beeped frantically as new data cascaded across his station. "Captain, whatever it is, it's accelerating toward us. Current velocity suggests intercept in approximately 18 minutes.
18 minutes until what? Elena demanded.
"Until it reaches us," Kethvar replied, his voice barely audible. "Until the Voidstalker finds us." The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Elena watched as every alien member of her crew suddenly went rigid with terror. Ensign Zara Thys, the young Calarian communications officer, actually fell from her chair, her golden scales flashing in distress patterns that Elena had never seen before. "The Voidstalker?" Elena repeated. "Someone want to explain to me what that is?" Vortok stood from his station, his massive frame somehow seeming smaller. "Captain, with respect, you need to order an immediate jump to hyperspace. We need to leave this system now." "I asked for an explanation, Chief, not evacuation orders." "Captain, Dr. Veluvi," Kethvar interjected, his scientific training warring with his obvious terror. "The Voidstalker is... It's a legend among our people, but the kind of legend that's based on horrible truth. It's said to be a creature of pure entropy, something that feeds on energy itself. It's destroyed entire star systems, consumed whole fleets, turned thriving worlds into dead husks floating in space." Elena looked around the bridge. Every alien face showed the same expression of absolute fear.
"And you all believe in this legend?"
It's not a legend. Lieutenant Yxandra, the Centauri tactical officer, spoke from her weapons station. Her usually sharp predatory features were drawn with dread.
"My grandmother was there during the Kethmore incident 800 years ago. She was one of only 12 survivors out of a fleet of 3,000 ships. She spent the rest of her life in therapy, and even then she would wake up screaming about the darkness that ate the light." Elena felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. Her crew was clearly terrified, and their fear was infectious. But something about their absolute certainty bothered her. In her 15 years of space exploration, Elena had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, those instincts were telling her that running away wasn't the answer. "Torres," she called to her first officer. "What's the status on our jump drive? Ready for immediate departure, Captain. We can be out of here in 30 seconds. Elena nodded, but made no move to give the order. Instead, she stood and walked to the main view screen, staring out at the star-filled void where something ancient and terrible was moving toward them. Dr. Kethva, what do we actually know about this creature? Not legends or stories, actual facts. The Altarian scientist looked confused by the question. Captain, there are no facts. Everyone who has encountered it has either died or fled. Those few who survive don't speak of it except to warn others to stay away. So no one has ever actually studied it? No one has tried to understand what it is or what it wants? Captain, Vortok's voice was pleading now. What it wants is to consume everything in its path. It's a force of pure destruction. Please, we must leave. Elena turned back to face her crew. She saw genuine terror in every alien face, but also something else, a kind of hopeless acceptance. They had already decided that death was inevitable if they stayed, and the only rational choice was to flee. But Elena had always been suspicious of things that everyone accepted without question. Isandra, what's the status of our weapons? The Zenthai looked at her in shock. Captain, you can't be thinking of fighting it. Our weapons are designed for ship-to-ship combat, not something like this. I'm not thinking of fighting it, Elena replied calmly. I'm thinking of understanding it. Dr. Kethvar, can you get me detailed sensor readings? I want to know everything about this creature's energy patterns, its composition, its behavior. Captain. Torres stepped up beside her, his voice low. Maybe we should listen to them. They've dealt with this thing before, and they're all saying the same thing. Elena looked at her first officer, a man she trusted with her life. When has running away ever solved anything, Marcus? When has refusing to understand something ever made it less dangerous? When that something has the power to destroy entire star systems, Torres replied quietly. Elena was quiet for a moment, considering his words. She looked around at her crew again, seeing the fear, the desperation, the absolute certainty that staying meant death. And yet, something deep in her human nature rebelled against that certainty. Humans had always been explorers, always been the ones to push boundaries and question assumptions. It's what had gotten them off their homeworld and into the stars in the first place. Dr. Kethvar, she said finally, I want those sensor readings. Full spectrum analysis, and I want you to try to establish communication protocols. Captain! Zarathus's voice was almost a shriek. You can't communicate with it. It doesn't think like us. It doesn't want anything from us except to devour us. Elena turned to face the young Kilarian. How do you know that? Has anyone ever tried? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Elena watched as her alien crew members exchanged glances, and she could see the answer in their expressions. No one had ever tried. For 3,000 years, the galaxy's response to the Voidstalker had been simple: run and hide. The very idea of trying to understand it or communicate with it was so foreign to them that they couldn't even process it. Captain, Dr. Kethvar said slowly, even if I could establish communication protocols, which is highly doubtful given the energy patterns I'm reading, the creature will be here in 15 minutes. We don't have time for a scientific survey. Elena smiled grimly. Then we'll have to work fast. All stations, I want maximum sensor resolution focused on our approaching visitor. I want to know everything we can learn about it before it gets here. And then? Vortok asked. Elena looked out at the view screen again, where the stars seemed to flicker and dance as something vast and dark moved between them and her ship. Then we'll see what humanity can teach the galaxy about monsters. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of sensors and the rapid beeping of instruments as the crew reluctantly began to follow her orders. Elena could feel their fear, their certainty that she was leading them all to their deaths, but she had made her choice. For better or worse, the stellar dawn would not run from the Voidstalker. Instead, they would meet it head-on, and Elena Vasquez would discover whether humanity's greatest strength, their refusal to accept that some things were impossible, was enough to face the galaxy's greatest fear. The countdown began. 14 minutes until contact. 14 minutes to learn everything they could about a creature that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. 14 minutes to prepare for an encounter that would either destroy them all or change everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of monsters. Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of her ship, watching darkness approach, and smiled. The first real glimpse of the Voidstalker came 12 minutes before contact, and it defied everything Elena had expected. She had imagined teeth and claws, armor and weapons, something that looked like the monsters from human nightmares. Instead, what appeared on the view screen was something far more unsettling, a ripple in space itself, a moving shadow that seemed to eat the starlight around it. Jesus, Torres whispered beside her. It's not a creature at all. Yes, it is, Dr. Kefvar corrected, his instruments painting impossible readings across his displays. I'm detecting biological signatures, but they're unlike anything in the galactic database. The creature appears to exist in a state of quantum flux, shifting between matter and energy at will. Elena leaned forward in her chair. Explain that in terms I can understand, Doctor. Kefvar's 4 hands danced across his controls as he tried to make sense of the data. It's as if the creature exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. What we're seeing is only a small part of its true form, like a shadow cast by something much larger. And it's still accelerating toward us, Lieutenant Yxandra reported from Tactical. Current velocity has increased to 0.7 light speed. At this rate, it will be here in 10 minutes. Elena watched the dark shape on the screen. It moved with a fluid grace that was both beautiful and terrifying, rippling through space like a whale swimming through an ocean of stars. Dr. Kefvar, what about those communication protocols? Captain, I'm trying, but its neural patterns are... Complex doesn't begin to describe it. It's like trying to have a conversation with a living galaxy. The sheer scope of its consciousness is overwhelming my equipment. Keep trying. Elena stood and walked to the communications station where Ensign Zarathai sat frozen in terror. The young Quilarian's golden scales were flashing in rapid distress patterns, and her breathing was shallow and rapid.
Ensign, Elena said gently, placing a hand on the alien's shoulder.
I need you to try something for me. Zarathis looked up at her captain with wide, fear-filled eyes. Captain, please. We need to leave. My people have legends about the Voidstalker that go back 2 millennia. It consumed our first colony fleet. Thousands of lives lost to that darkness. Elena knelt beside the young officer's chair. Tell me about those legends, Zara. Not the warnings. The actual stories. What did the survivors say? They said it spoke to them. Before it attacked. But not in words. It spoke directly into their minds, showing them visions of their own deaths, of their worlds burning, of the emptiness between stars. It communicated? Elena's eyes sharpened. Then it can be reasoned with. No! Zarathis grabbed Elena's arm with surprising strength. Captain, you don't understand. It didn't communicate to negotiate or to warn. It communicated to torment. It wanted them to know they were going to die, to feel the despair before the end came. Elena looked at the young alien's terrified face and felt a surge of protective anger. Whatever this creature was, it had spent millennia terrorizing innocent people, feeding on their fear and despair. The galaxy had responded by running, by hiding, by accepting that some things were too dangerous to face. But Elena was human, and humans had a long history of refusing to accept the impossible. Zara, I want you to open all communication channels, every frequency we have. Captain, the Kalarian whispered, what if it hears us? What if we attract its attention? Elena smiled grimly. We already have its attention. It's coming straight for us. The question is whether we're going to face it cowering in fear or standing up with dignity. Meanwhile, at the engineering station, Chief Vortok was running diagnostics on every system aboard the ship. His rocky exterior was sweating the mineral oil that served as perspiration for his people, and his 6 eyes were darting between displays with increasing anxiety. Captain, he called out, I'm detecting massive gravitational distortions in our vicinity. The creature's presence is affecting local spacetime. If it gets much closer, it could tear us apart just by existing in our general area. How much closer? Elena asked. At current approach speed, we'll start experiencing structural damage in approximately 8 minutes. Elena nodded and turned back to the view screen. The dark shape was larger now, no longer just a ripple, but a vast flowing shadow that seemed to stretch across multiple star systems. As she watched, she noticed something that made her heart race. Patterns in the darkness, almost like neural pathways or circulatory systems, pulsing with faint bioluminescence. Doctor, Kefvar, she called. Are you seeing this? The patterns in its structure. The Altarian scientist looked up from his instruments, following Elena's gaze to the screen. His blue skin went even paler. Yes, Captain. They appear to be synaptic networks. The creature's brain activity is visible from here, which suggests what? Which suggests it's thinking about us, specifically about us. Those neural patterns are focused entirely on our ship. A chill ran down Elena's spine, but she forced herself to remain calm. What's it thinking about us? I can't tell. The thought patterns are too complex. But Captain, the energy output from those neural networks is enormous. Whatever it's thinking very hard. Lieutenant Torres moved to Elena's side, his voice low and urgent. Captain, the crew is asking for your orders. The alien crew members are barely holding it together, and even our human personnel are getting nervous. We need to make a decision. Elena looked around the bridge. She could see the fear in every face, the barely controlled panic that threatened to break loose at any moment. Her crew trusted her, but they also expected her to keep them alive. Every instinct, every piece of conventional wisdom, every legend and story told the same thing. Face the Void Stalker meant death. But Elena had never put much stock in conventional wisdom. Dr. Kethvar, she said, what's the status on communication protocols? I've managed to establish a basic neural link interface, but Captain, I strongly advise against using it. Direct mental contact with something like this could be extremely dangerous.
Define dangerous. Brain death, insanity, complete neural collapse.
The creature's consciousness is so vast that human minds aren't designed to process it. It would be like trying to pour an ocean into a teacup. Elena considered this information. Around her, the bridge crew waited for her decision. She could order the jump to hyperspace. They could be gone in 30 seconds, leaving the Void Stalker behind in the empty Xerion system. Her crew would live, and they could report back to the Galactic Council about their encounter. But then what? The creature would still be out there, still terrorizing anyone unfortunate enough to encounter it. The galaxy would continue living in fear, continue running from something they didn't understand. And Elena knew that sooner or later, running wouldn't be enough. Sooner or later, they would have to face this thing, and it was better to face it now when they had some small advantage of surprise. Open the communication link, she ordered. Captain! Multiple voices called out in protest, but Elena held up a hand for silence. I said open the link, but route it through me. If there's going to be brain death or insanity, I'll take the risk myself. Doctor! Kethvar's hands hesitated over his controls. Captain, this is madness. You could die just from the attempt. People have been dying from this creature for 3,000 years, Doctor. Maybe it's time someone tried a different approach. Elena walked back to her command chair and sat down. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, centering herself the way her grandmother had taught her during meditation sessions back on Earth. She thought of her crew, her responsibility to them, and her responsibility to the galaxy. She thought of all the people who had fled in terror from this creature, all the worlds that had been evacuated, all the lives that had been lost. Zara, open all channels. Kethvar, establish the neural link. Captain, Torres said quietly, if it goes wrong, you have command. Get the ship out of here and report back to command. Tell them what we learned. Elena felt the neural interface come online like a whisper in the back of her mind. At first, there was nothing but static, the empty hiss of space between stars. Then, gradually, she began to sense something vast and ancient moving toward them through the dark. Contact established. Doctor. Kethvar reported, his voice tight with strain. Neural patterns are synchronizing. Captain, are you all right? Elena didn't answer immediately. She was focused on the presence in her mind, trying to understand what she was sensing. It was huge, far larger than any consciousness she had ever imagined. It felt old, incredibly old, with depths of memory and experience that stretched back eons. And underneath it all, she sensed something that surprised her completely. Pain, loneliness, a deep, aching sadness that seemed to permeate every thought. My God, she whispered, opening her eyes to look at the view screen. It's not a monster at all, Captain? Torres leaned forward, concern evident in his voice. Elena stood slowly, her mind still connected to the vast presence approaching their ship. The neural link was holding, and through it, she could sense the creature's confusion. It had expected fear, expected the same terror and revulsion it had encountered for millennia. Instead, it was finding something it had never experienced before, curiosity and compassion. It's dying, Elena said softly. It's been dying for thousands of years, and it doesn't know how to stop. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of instruments and the distant sound of the creature's approach. Elena looked at her crew, seeing confusion replace fear in their faces. The energy it feeds on, she continued, it's not malicious, it's medicinal. It's trying to heal itself, but it doesn't understand that it's hurting others in the process. Captain, Dr. Kethvar said slowly, that's impossible. The creature has destroyed entire civilizations. Yes, Elena agreed, but not out of malice, out of desperation. It's like a dying animal that bites the hand trying to help it because it doesn't understand help from harm. Through the neural link, Elena could sense the creature's growing interest in their conversation. It had never encountered minds that sought to understand rather than simply flee. For the first time in millennia, it was experiencing something other than fear and hatred from other beings. Captain, Lieutenant Yashandra called from Tactical. It's slowing down. Velocity is decreased to 0.4 light speed and continuing to decelerate. Elena smiled, keeping her eyes closed to maintain the neural connection. It's curious about us. It's never met anyone who wasn't afraid of it. What do we do? Torres asked. Elena opened her eyes and looked at the view screen, where the vast shadow was now close enough to blot out entire sections of stars. Through the neural link, she could feel its ancient loneliness, its confusion, its desperate need for connection with other living beings. We help it, she said, simply. We do what no one else has ever done. We try to heal the monster. The countdown continued. 5 minutes until direct contact with the most feared creature in the galaxy. But for the first time in 3,000 years, someone was approaching the Void Stalker not as prey or victim, but as a potential friend. Elena Vasquez was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones that have forgotten how to be anything else. The neural connection deepened as the creature drew closer, and Elena felt her consciousness expanding in ways that should have been impossible. Through the link, she experienced fragments of the Voidstalker's memories, ancient beyond comprehension, stretching back to the early days of the galaxy, when the first civilizations were taking their tentative steps into space. She saw its birth among the dying embers of a collapsed star, a natural occurrence so rare that it might happen only once in a billion years. She felt its first moments of consciousness, alone in the void, hungry and afraid, and desperately seeking others like itself. She experienced its joy when it first encountered spacefaring life, and its devastating confusion when those beings fled in terror from its approach. Captain. Doctor. Kethvar's voice seemed to come from very far away. Your neural patterns are synchronizing with the creatures. This is incredibly dangerous. You need to break the connection. Elena ignored him. Through the creature's eyes, she saw the galaxy as it truly was, not a collection of separate worlds and species, but a single interconnected web of life and energy. The creature existed on multiple dimensional planes simultaneously, able to perceive the quantum threads that connected all living things. To it, the boundaries between individual minds were as arbitrary as lines drawn on maps. It doesn't understand why we're afraid of it, Elena said aloud, her voice distant and dreamy. From its perspective, it's trying to connect with us the same way we might reach out to pet a frightened animal. Captain! Taurus's voice was sharp with worry. You've been connected for 3 minutes. Dr. Kethvar says that's approaching the safety limit. Through the neural link, Elena felt the creature's growing excitement. It had found something unprecedented. A mind that didn't recoil from its touch. That tried to understand rather than simply survive. For the first time in millennia, it wasn't alone with its pain and confusion. The creature began to share more of its memories, and Elena saw the truth behind the legends that had terrified the galaxy for 3,000 years. Every encounter, every attack had been an attempt at communication that went horribly wrong. The creature would approach other ships, trying to establish the same kind of neural link that Elena was now experiencing. But the minds it encountered were small, fragile, incapable of processing its vast consciousness without being overwhelmed. The results had always been the same: madness, death, or at best, survivors so traumatized that they could only speak of darkness and horror. The creature, unable to understand why its attempts at friendship caused such devastation, would retreat back into the void, more lonely and confused than before. It's been trying to make friends, Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. For 3,000 years, it's been trying to find someone who could understand it, and all it's accomplished is making the galaxy afraid. Captain, Chief Fortok called from engineering. The gravitational distortions are increasing. Hull integrity is down to 70%. Whatever this thing is, it's going to tear us apart just by getting close. Elena felt the creature's alarm through the neural link. It had become aware of the damage its presence was causing to the stellar dawn, and it was trying desperately to reduce its gravitational output. But it had never learned how to control its power around smaller beings. Its very existence was dangerous to conventional matter. Kethvar. Elena called, opening her eyes but maintaining the mental connection. Can you modulate our hull integrity field to compensate for the gravitational distortions? I can try, but Captain, you need to break that connection now. Your brain patterns are becoming increasingly erratic. I don't know how much longer your mind can handle the strain. Elena looked at the view screen, where the creature now filled most of their view. It was beautiful in an alien way, patterns of bioluminescent neural activity flowing across its surface like aurora on a planetary scale. Through the link, she could feel its desperate hope that this contact might be different, that finally it had found minds capable of true communication. It's not going to hurt us, she said with absolute certainty. It's more afraid of hurting us than we are of being hurt. Captain, Lieutenant Yxandra reported from Tactical. It stopped. Distance is holding steady at 50,000 kilometers. It's just watching us. Through the neural connection, Elena could sense the creature's internal struggle. It wanted desperately to come closer, to establish fuller contact, but it was terrified of causing more damage. It had learned through millennia of failed encounters that its touch was death to smaller beings, and it didn't want to add Elena's ship to its long list of inadvertent victims. Elena made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone else aboard the ship. She stood from her command chair and walked toward the main view screen, placing her hands against the transparent aluminum surface. "What are you doing?" Torres demanded. "I'm going to meet it halfway," Elena replied. "Doctor." "Kethvar, can you boost the neural link to maximum strength?" "Captain, that could kill you. Or it could save all of us." "Do it." Elena felt the connection intensify, and suddenly she was no longer just sensing the creature's consciousness, she was sharing it. Her awareness expanded exponentially as she experienced existence from the Voidstalker's perspective. She felt the currents of dark matter flowing around them, sensed the quantum fluctuations that held reality together, perceived the infinite complexity of space-time itself. But more importantly, she felt the creature's overwhelming relief and joy at finally finding a mind that could touch its own without breaking. Through their shared consciousness, Elena was able to show the creature something it had never experienced before. The perspective of smaller beings, the fragility of individual minds, the terror that its approach inspired.
For the first time in its existence, the Voidstalker understood why others fled from it.
"Oh," Elena whispered, speaking both for herself and for the creature. "Oh, we've been so alone."
The revelation was devastating for both participants in the link.
Elena experienced the full weight of the creature's isolation. 3,000 years of wandering the void, desperately seeking companionship, leaving destruction in its wake, not through malice, but through ignorance. The creature, in turn, felt the pain of all its inadvertent victims, understanding for the first time that its attempts at friendship had been perceived as attacks. "Captain!" Dr. Kethvar's voice was urgent. "Neural activity is off the charts. You're approaching complete consciousness merger. If this continues, you might not be able to separate your mind from its." Elena barely heard him. Through the link, she and the creature were communicating at speeds that transcended language. They shared memories, emotions, experiences. Elena showed the creature images of Earth, of human families and friendships, of the bonds that held societies together. The creature shared its perspective on the galaxy, its understanding of the fundamental forces that shaped reality, its eons of accumulated wisdom about the nature of existence. But most importantly, they shared solutions. Elena realized that the creature's inability to control its power around smaller beings wasn't a fundamental limitation. It was simply a lack of education. The creature had never learned to modulate its presence because it had never encountered anyone who could survive long enough to teach it. Through their shared consciousness, Elena began to show it how to create protective barriers, how to shield others from its gravitational effects, how to establish communication without overwhelming smaller minds. The creature, in turn, shared knowledge that could revolutionize galactic civilization. It showed Elena how to manipulate dark matter, how to travel instantly between distant points in space, how to tap into the quantum foam that underlied all reality. The scientific advances contained in its memory were beyond anything the Galactic Council had imagined. "Captain," Torres's voice seemed to come from another universe entirely. "The creature's energy patterns are changing. It's doing something to its gravitational field." Elena smiled, tears still streaming down her face. Through their shared consciousness, she felt the creature, carefully, delicately, adjusting its presence. The dangerous gravitational distortions that had threatened to tear the stellar dawn apart began to fade as the creature learned to contain its power. Hull integrity stabilizing at 95%, Chief Vortok reported, amazement clear in his voice. the gravitational distortions are almost gone. How is that possible? Dr. Kethvar asked. Elena turned from the view screen to face her crew, the neural link still holding strong. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there before, echoes of the creature's vast consciousness. It's learning, she said simply. For the first time in its existence, someone is teaching it how to exist alongside smaller beings without causing harm. Through the link, Elena felt the creature's growing confidence. It was like watching a child take its first steps, or a blind person seeing light for the first time. The Voidstalker was discovering that it didn't have to be alone, that it didn't have to be a monster. It could be something else entirely. Captain, Ensign Zarathis whispered from the communication station. Something's happening. I'm receiving signals on all frequencies. But they're not from the creature directly. They're from everywhere. Elena nodded, understanding immediately. As the creature's consciousness expanded to encompass their ship, its enhanced sensors were picking up communication signals from across the galaxy. Ships in distress, planets trying to contact their governments, space stations sending routine reports. The creature was inadvertently creating a galaxy-wide communication network connecting disparate points of civilization across impossible distances. This is unprecedented, Dr. Kethvar breathed, staring at his instruments. The creature is acting as some kind of quantum relay, instantly connecting communication nodes across the galaxy. The implications for galactic civilization are staggering. Elena felt the creature's excitement at this discovery. It had found a way to help, to contribute something positive to the galaxy that had feared it for so long. But more than that, it had found purpose. Instead of being a monster that destroyed, it could be a bridge that connected. Captain, Torres said quietly, what happens now? Elena looked out at the view screen, where the creature's bioluminescent patterns were now pulsing in rhythm with the stellar dawn's own systems. Through their shared consciousness, she could feel its hope for the future, its eagerness to learn more about the galaxy it had wandered alone for so long. Now, she said, we teach the galaxy that monsters are often just misunderstood beings who need help finding their place in the universe. The neural link between Elena and the Voidstalker stabilized, creating something unprecedented in galactic history. A permanent bridge between human consciousness and something far greater than any individual mind. Through this connection, Elena would become the translator between worlds, the mediator between the vast and the small, the person who proved that understanding was always possible if someone was brave enough to try. But their work was just beginning. The galaxy still saw the Voidstalker as a monster, and changing 3,000 years of fear and prejudice would not be easy. Elena looked at her crew, seeing wonder beginning to replace terror in their faces, and knew that this was only the first step in a much larger journey. The monster had been tamed not through force or threats, but through compassion and understanding. Now it was time to show the rest of the galaxy what humanity had learnt in the darkness between stars, that sometimes the most fearsome creatures are the ones most in need of friendship. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the Stellar Dawn's first contact with the Voidstalker, and the mood in the Great Chamber was one of barely controlled panic. Representatives from 700 worlds had gathered on the neutral station of Nexus Prime, their faces showing every emotion from terror to disbelief to outright rage. Elena stood at the center of the council chamber, the neural link with the creature still active but muted to allow normal conversation. Behind her, holographic displays showed the impossible sight that had been broadcast across the galaxy. The Voidstalker, the monster that had terrorized civilizations for 3 millennia, peacefully orbiting the Xerion system while serving as a quantum communication relay for over 30 star systems. This is madness, declared High Commander Vextal of the Crealian Empire, his massive form rising from the stone bench designated for his species. For 3,000 years, we have known that creature to be a bringer of death. Now you expect us to believe it has simply reformed? Elena looked up at the towering alien, feeling the creature's attention through their link. It was listening to every word, trying to understand the fear and hostility still directed toward it despite its recent actions. High Commander, Elena replied calmly. What I'm telling you is that we were wrong about its nature. The Voidstalker isn't malicious. It's been trying to communicate with us all along. We just couldn't understand its methods. Its methods? The voice belonged to Ambassador Kirishan of the Kalarian Collective, her golden scales flashing in agitation patterns. Its methods killed my grandmother's entire expeditionary fleet 800 years ago. 3,000 ships, High Captain. 3,000 crews who never came home. Elena felt the creature's profound sadness through their link. as it became aware of yet another tragedy it had inadvertently caused. The weight of 3 millennia of misunderstandings was crushing for both participants in their shared consciousness. "I know," Elena said softly, "and the creature knows too now. Through our connection, it has experienced the pain and loss it caused. It understands what its presence meant to smaller beings, and it's learned to control its power to prevent further harm." Learned? Supreme Chancellor Offlan of the Altarian Republic leaned forward on her bioorganic throne. "You speak as if it's a child who simply needed education rather than a force of cosmic destruction." "In many ways, that's exactly what it is," Elena replied. "The Void Stalker exists on a scale so vast that what we consider an individual consciousness is like a single neuron to it. It never understood that we were separate beings with our own thoughts and fears. To it, we were just distant echoes of consciousness that it was trying to reach." The chamber erupted in voices as representatives argued among themselves. Elena waited patiently, listening to the debate while feeling the creature's growing understanding of galactic politics through their link. It was beginning to comprehend not just individual minds, but the complex social structures that bound civilizations together. Fleet Admiral Zektor of the United Defense Force stood to address the chamber, his cybernetic implants gleaming under the lights. "Even if we accept Captain Vasquez's explanation of the creature's motivations, the fact remains that it is incredibly dangerous. One gravitational fluctuation from that thing could destabilize entire star systems. Which is why it's learned to control its power," Elena responded. "In the 3 days since our first contact, the Void Stalker has established communication relays for 37 star systems without a single incident. Ships that used to take weeks to reach command centers are now receiving instantaneous responses. The creature is proving its value to galactic civilization." "And what happens when it gets bored with playing communication satellite?" demanded General Yistra of the Zenthari war clan. "What happens when it decides to resume its old patterns?" Elena turned to face the fierce warrior, feeling the creature's curiosity about the Zenthari through their link. "It won't," she said with absolute certainty. "Through our connection, I can feel its emotional state. It's experiencing something it's never had before. Purpose, friendship, a sense of belonging. It has no desire to return to the isolation it knew before." "You ask us to bet the safety of the entire galaxy on your interpretation of an alien creature's emotional state," observed Dr. Four. "Meltara, the chief xenopsychologist of the Galactic Science Consortium. Even if your assessment is correct today, what guarantee do we have that it will remain stable?" Elena smiled, sensing the creature's amusement at being called alien when, from its perspective, every other form of life in the galaxy was alien to it. "Dr. Melthara, with respect, we've been betting the safety of the galaxy on fear and ignorance for 3,000 years. My approach might be unconventional, but it's produced better results in 3 days than we achieved in 3 millennia." The truth of this statement was impossible to deny. Since the creature had learned to control its power, it had facilitated more successful interstellar communication than the Galactic Council's own networks. Distress calls that used to go unanswered for weeks were now being responded to within hours. Scientific data that took months to transmit between research stations was now shared instantaneously.
"There is another consideration," said High Priestess Valandra of the Ethereal Communion, her translucent form shimmering as she spoke. "If this creature possesses the level of consciousness that Captain Vasquez describes, then our treatment of it over the past 3 millennia could be considered a form of persecution."
"We may owe it reparations rather than continued hostility." This observation sent a fresh wave of debate through the chamber. The idea that the galaxy might owe something to the creature they had feared for so long was difficult for many representatives to accept. Elena felt the creature's response to this suggestion through their link, not a demand for compensation, but a simple desire for acceptance and understanding. All it had ever wanted was to not be alone in the vast darkness of space. "The creature doesn't want reparations," Elena announced, drawing the chamber's attention back to her. "It wants something much simpler and much more valuable. It wants friends." "Friends?" Admiral Zektor's cybernetic implants whirred as he processed this information. "A cosmic entity that could swallow our largest ships without noticing wants to be friends with us?"
"Yes," Elena replied simply.
"And in return for that friendship, it's offering to share knowledge and capabilities that could advance our civilization by thousands of years. It understands dark matter manipulation, quantum field dynamics, and dimensional physics in ways we can barely comprehend. It could teach us to travel instantly between any 2 points in the galaxy, to tap into unlimited energy sources, to extend the lives of our stars themselves." The chamber fell silent, as the implications of Elena's words sank in. The technological advances the creature could provide would revolutionize every aspect of galactic civilization. But accepting those advances meant accepting the creature itself. There's something else, Elena continued, feeling the creature's permission to share deeper information. The Void Stalker isn't unique. Through its expanded awareness, it's detected others like itself scattered across distant galaxies, beings of similar scale and power, equally isolated and confused. If we can establish a positive relationship with this one, it could serve as an ambassador to others, potentially opening communication with cosmic entities across the entire universe. This revelation sent another wave of excitement and fear through the chamber. The idea of contact with beings on a universal scale was both thrilling and terrifying. "You're asking us to fundamentally change our understanding of our place in the cosmos," observed Supreme Chancellor Othlan. "To accept that we share the universe with entities so vast that our entire civilization is barely visible to them." "I'm asking you to accept reality," Elena replied. "These entities exist whether we acknowledge them or not. The question is whether we want to continue living in fear of them or whether we want to learn to coexist and benefit from that coexistence." Chief Science Officer Ralton of the Technological Union stood to address the chamber. "Captain Vasquez, you've demonstrated that communication with this entity is possible. But how do we know that your neural link isn't affecting your judgment? How do we know you're still thinking independently?" Elena had been expecting this question. "You don't," she admitted. "The link changes me just as it changes the creature. But those changes aren't a loss of independence. They're an expansion of perspective. I can think on multiple levels simultaneously, perceive dimensions of reality that normal consciousness can't access. I'm still Elena Vasquez, but I'm also something more." She paused, feeling the creature's support through their connection. "But if you don't trust my perspective, then trust the results. In 3 days, we've accomplished more positive interaction with the Void Stalker than the galaxy managed in 3,000 years. The creature is actively helping us, protecting our ships, facilitating our communications. Judge it by its actions, not by ancient fears." The debate continued for hours, but Elena could sense the tide turning. The practical benefits of cooperation with the creature were becoming impossible to ignore. Star systems that had been isolated for decades were suddenly part of an instantaneous communication network. Scientific research that had been stalled by slow data transmission was accelerating rapidly. Even the most conservative representatives were beginning to see the potential advantages. Finally, Supreme Chancellor Othlan called for a preliminary vote. All in favor of establishing formal diplomatic relations with the entity known as the Void Stalker? Elena watched as representatives throughout the chamber raised their hands, claws, tentacles, and other appendages in a voting gesture. The count was closer than she had hoped, but decisive enough to proceed. 60% in favor of diplomatic contact. "Motion carried," the Chancellor announced. "Captain Vasquez, you are hereby appointed as the official galactic ambassador to the Void Stalker, with full authority to negotiate on behalf of all member worlds." Elena felt the creature's joy through their link, as it learned that it was no longer considered a monster by galactic civilization. For the first time in 3 millennia, it would be treated as a fellow being worthy of respect and friendship. But Elena also felt its deeper concern. Through its expanded awareness, the creature had detected troubling signs. Other entities like itself, but ones that had been driven mad by eons of isolation and rejection. Not all cosmic beings were as inherently benevolent as the Void Stalker, and some had learned to embrace their role as monsters. The galaxy was about to discover that the Void Stalker had been one of the gentler examples of its kind. And somewhere in the dark between galaxies, others were beginning to take notice of the small beings who had befriended their lost sibling. Elena's work as humanity's first cosmic diplomat was just beginning, and the challenges ahead would test everything the galaxy thought it knew about monsters, friendship, and the thin line between salvation and destruction. 6 months after first contact, Elena stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching the Void Stalker's bioluminescent patterns dance across the cosmic web of dark matter that surrounded them. The creature had grown brighter over the past months, its neural networks blazing with activity as it processed the constant stream of communication traffic it now facilitated across 17 star systems. Through their permanent neural link, Elena could feel its contentment. For the first time in its ancient existence, the creature had purpose beyond mere survival. It had become the galaxy's most efficient communication system, its quantum consciousness able to instantly relay messages across vast distances. More importantly, it had friends. Ambassador, called Dr. Karvich. Sarah Chen, Elena's human assistant, and the station's chief xenopsychologist. We're receiving priority communications from the Galactic Council. They're requesting an immediate conference. Elena nodded, not taking her eyes off the magnificent being that had once been the galaxy's greatest fear. What's the urgency level? Maximum. They're using the cosmic emergency protocols. Elena felt a chill run down her spine, and through their link she sensed the Voidstalker's immediate attention shifting to her emotional state. The creature had become incredibly sensitive to the moods of its smaller friends, particularly Elena herself. "Patch it through to my office," Elena said, finally turning away from the observation window. "And Dr. Chen, make sure all our long-range sensors are active. If the Council is calling a cosmic emergency, there's something out there that has them scared." Minutes later, Elena sat in her office facing a holographic display filled with the terrified faces of the Galactic Council's leadership. Supreme Chancellor Othland's usually composed features were tight with strain, and even Fleet Admiral Zektor's cybernetic implants seemed to be flickering with stress indicators. "Ambassador Vasquez," the Chancellor began without preamble, "we need the Voidstalker's help. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected something approaching from the galactic rim. Something like your friend, but different." Elena felt the creature's attention focus completely on the conversation as it accessed the Council's communication networks directly. Through their link, she experienced its growing alarm as it processed the incoming data. "Different how?" Elena asked, though she was already beginning to understand through the creature's reaction. "Bigger," Admiral Zektor replied grimly. "Much bigger. And according to our readings, it's leaving a trail of dead star systems in its wake. Entire solar systems are going dark as it passes through them." Elena closed her eyes and let her consciousness merge more fully with the Voidstalker's vast awareness. Through its expanded senses, she could perceive the approaching entity as her friend could, a writhing mass of cosmic hunger and rage, easily 10 times larger than the Voidstalker itself. Where her friend was a creature of sad loneliness seeking connection, this new entity radiated fury and despair turned toxic. "It's called the Devourer," Elena said, opening her eyes to face the Council. "And it's insane." Supreme Chancellor Othland leaned forward. "You can identify it. Your creature knows what this thing is." Elena felt the Voidstalker's painful memories surface through their link. They knew each other, eons ago, before either of them encountered galactic civilization. "The Devourer was driven mad by isolation and rejection long before my friend was born. It spent the last several million years consuming everything it encounters, growing larger and more powerful with each galaxy it destroys. And it's heading directly for us," Admiral Zektor added. "At current velocity, it will reach the outer rim of our galaxy in approximately 4 months." Elena felt her friend's terror through their connection, but also its determination. The Voidstalker would not allow its new friends to suffer the same fate as the Devourer's previous victims. "What can we do?" she asked both the Council and her cosmic friend simultaneously. Through their link, Elena experienced a rapid exchange of information as the Voidstalker accessed databases across the galaxy, calculating possibilities, analyzing the approaching threat. What it discovered was both hopeful and terrifying. "The Devourer can be stopped," Elena announced, "but not by conventional means. It's too large and too powerful for any military force to defeat. The only thing that could destroy it is another entity of similar power." "You mean your creature?" the Chancellor asked. Elena felt the Voidstalker's complex emotions through their link: fear, determination, and a deep sadness at what might be necessary. "My friend is willing to fight it," she said softly. "But there are complications. The battle would likely destroy both entities, and the energy release could destabilize every star system within 1,000 light-years." "There has to be another way," Dr. Malthara interjected. "You've proven that communication is possible with these entities. Can't you reason with this Devourer as you did with the Voidstalker?" Elena shook her head, feeling her friend's certainty through their link. "The Devourer is beyond reason. Millions of years of isolation and rejection have driven it completely insane. It no longer remembers what it was like to want anything other than destruction. It can't be healed because it doesn't want to be healed." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They were facing a threat that their most powerful ally could only stop through self-sacrifice, and even that victory would come at an almost unacceptable cost. "How long do we have?" Admiral Zektor asked quietly. "Less than we thought," Elena replied, feeling new data flow through her connection with the Voidstalker. "The Devourer has detected my friend's presence. It's accelerating towards us. We now have approximately 6 weeks before it reaches the outer rim." Elena felt her cosmic friend's sudden decision through their link, and she stood abruptly from her chair. I need to go. My friend has an idea, but it's going to require something that's never been attempted before.
What kind of idea? The Chancellor demanded.
Elena was already moving toward the door of her office, the kind that could either save the galaxy or destroy it. I'll contact you when I know more. She cut the communication link and hurried to the station's central chamber, where the most sophisticated neural interface ever constructed allowed her to achieve deeper communion with the Voidstalker than ever before. Dr. Chen followed close behind, her instruments ready to monitor Elena's vital signs during what promised to be an unprecedented mental merger.
Elena, Dr. Chen said as Elena approached the neural interface, your brain patterns are already showing extreme activity.
Whatever your friend is planning, it's affecting you at the cellular level. Elena paused at the interface, feeling the creature's vast consciousness pressing against her mind like an ocean against a dam.
Sarah, I need you to record everything that happens here. If this goes wrong, the galaxy needs to know what we attempted. She activated the interface and felt her consciousness expand exponentially as she merged completely with the Voidstalker's awareness. Together, they reached out across the galaxy, touching every communication network, every sensor array, every artificial intelligence. What they were attempting had never been tried before. They were going to create a galaxy-wide consciousness network. Through their combined awareness, Elena and the Voidstalker began connecting every sentient mind in the galaxy. Not just the advanced civilizations that belonged to the Galactic Council, but every form of consciousness, from the primitive tribal minds of pre-spaceflight species to the vast artificial intelligences that managed interstellar commerce. Even the quantum consciousness matrices of the galaxy's most advanced computers were drawn into the expanding network. Dr. Haas. Chen watched in amazement as energy patterns unlike anything ever recorded flowed through the neural interface. Elena!
Your neural activity is off every scale we have. What are you doing? Elena's voice, when it came, carried harmonics that resonated across multiple dimensions of space-time.
We're showing the galaxy that consciousness is stronger than destruction.
Across 17 star systems, sentient beings suddenly found their minds expanded beyond their individual boundaries. A Creelian mining engineer on a distant asteroid felt his consciousness touch that of an Altarian philosopher on the other side of the galaxy.
A young Kolarian student found her thoughts merging with those of an ancient Centauri warrior. Artificial intelligences that had operated in isolation for centuries suddenly discovered they were part of a vast community of minds. The effect was overwhelming and beautiful. For the first time in galactic history, every conscious being in known space experienced what the Voidstalker had always known, that all consciousness was connected, that individual minds were part of a larger, magnificent whole. But more than connection, the network created something new, a collective will, a shared purpose that transcended species and ideology. Trillions of minds, from the smallest to the vastest, united in a single goal: the protection of life and consciousness in their galaxy.
Through the network, Elena and the Voidstalker sent out a message that reached across the cosmic void to where the Devourer raged in its approach. It was not a plea for mercy or a threat of retaliation.
It was something far more powerful. It was an invitation. The message carried the combined emotional weight of every conscious being in the galaxy. Love, hope, friendship, the joy of discovery, the beauty of art, the satisfaction of achievement, the comfort of family, the excitement of new ideas. It was everything that made consciousness worth preserving, everything that the Devourer had forgotten in its eons of isolation and madness. For a moment that lasted eternity, the Devourer paused in its destructive advance. Through the galaxy-wide network, trillions of minds felt its ancient pain, its confusion, its desperate hunger for connection that had been twisted into an urge to destroy. They felt its surprise at being offered understanding rather than fear, love rather than hatred. Elena, serving as the focal point for the entire galaxy's consciousness, reached out to the Devourer with an offer no one had made in millions of years: the chance to come home, to be part of something larger than destruction, to remember what it had been before madness consumed it. The Devourer's response shattered the cosmic void with the force of its emotion. Eons of rage and loneliness poured out of it in waves that rippled across dimensional barriers. But underneath the fury, Elena sensed something else. A tiny spark of the being it had once been, the part of it that remembered what it was like to want connection rather than destruction. The battle for the Devourer's consciousness was fought not with weapons or energy beams, but with memories and emotions shared across impossible distances. The galaxy offered the mad entity everything it had lost: friendship, purpose, belonging. Every sentient being in the network contributed their own experiences of love and connection, creating a tapestry of consciousness so beautiful and complete that even madness could not resist it. Slowly, incredibly, the Devourer began to change. Its destructive advance slowed, then stopped. The dark energy that had consumed entire star systems began to shift, becoming something else. Still vast and powerful, but no longer driven by hunger and rage. Through the network, Elena felt the exact moment when the Devourer remembered what it was like to be loved. The psychic shockwave of that realization rippled across the galaxy, touching every connected mind with indescribable joy. When Elena finally disconnected from the neural interface, hours later, she found Dr. Chen staring at the readings with tears streaming down her face. "The Devourer stopped," Sarah reported in wonder. It's sending peaceful communication signals. And, Elena, the galaxy-wide consciousness network is holding steady. You've created something unprecedented, a permanent connection between every sentient mind in known space. Elena smiled weakly, exhausted by the effort but filled with hope. Through her link with the Voidstalker, she could feel its profound happiness. Its sibling had come home, the galaxy was safe, and consciousness had proven stronger than destruction. But more than that, Elena realized as she looked at the readings from across the galaxy, they had accomplished something even greater. They had proven that no being was beyond redemption, that even the most feared monster could be healed with enough understanding and love. The galaxy would never be the same. Connected by consciousness and united by purpose, its inhabitants had learned the greatest lesson humanity had to offer, that monsters are often just heroes who have forgotten how to hope. And somewhere in the vast network of connected minds, Elena Vasquez smiled as she felt the gratitude of two cosmic entities who would never have to be alone again.